So to start with, did you face any moral or ethical issues on placement? How would you face them and deal with them more appropriately in the future? Anyone has faced any incidents?
So when I was on my most recent placement, I wasn't given access to my students' information on their online platform. So that made it really hard for me to plan lessons and know how to cater to them. Because my mental teacher felt that it wasn't ethical, I guess, or safe for me to have access to that information. So I think what I would have done differently, instead of just trying to persuade him to give me the information, I would have talked to the school coordinator about it and asked, maybe in a high position, maybe what their thoughts were. I don't know if anyone has other suggestions.
So on placement, so some ethical issues that I faced was, when we're working with online learning, we had all of our students turn off their cameras at all times, just so that we're not, putting ourselves at jeopardy if students are coming on camera who are in their pajamas or not wearing a uniform, or if they're video chatting from their bedrooms. We thought it was best to keep the cameras off, but obviously that was a major issue for us because it's hard to engage with students when the camera's off. We don't know if they're actually there, or what's happening. So that was quite hard. Hopefully we won't have to deal with much of that when we're going out into the profession, but that was probably the most the hardest ethical issue I faced, I reckon.
That's true. Yeah. So I didn't have much incident with my placement, but I do private tutoring, and what you're saying is true, Alicia, because most of the times my younger kids, they try to keep their video on, but elder ones up from year 9 up, they don't want to. So in that case, yeah, so it's acceptable, but still you don't know whether they are there or not, so it's very challenging. Yeah. Any other incidents, or we move on to second part? Yeah. Okay. Is it okay for us to teach? Is it okay for us as teachers to become moral educators? How would we approach that?
I think that's a weird kind of thing, because yes, as teachers we do have to maybe have debates. I know a lot of teachers tend to base their teaching around current situations, and they do tend to address current events. So maybe in current schools, because the US elections are going on, a lot of teachers may choose to talk about it and discuss views and stuff on it, which is okay to understand and let students understand that there are different views and opinions and stuff like that, and shed light on that. But I think we're also in that that power of we can persuade students minds and stuff, which is kind of, I guess, not okay, because what if you don't have the right morals or the right views? So I think it's one of those tricky ones where we have the power to be moral educators, but it doesn't necessarily mean we have the right morals to be moral educators. I guess that's what I'm trying to say.
Yeah, I agree. I think there's a certain extent that we can teach morals, but even disregarding what your morals are and what you're teaching, your approach to teaching those morals might be completely harmless, but then you could still end up ostracizing students that have been taught differently if you're constantly pushing your agenda, and then they might not feel comfortable in your classroom, and they might not feel like they can even connect with you because you're just not in agreement on anything with them.
Yeah, that's everyone has their own personal philosophy, so we can't push anyone to think differently or act differently. So it's always good if everyone can make their own decisions about life. Or Any other thoughts about it?
Yeah, I just find that really challenging because at the moment I'm studying the teaching Indigenous students topic, and I'm learning about critical pedagogy, right, which is where it sees teachers as people who create change in society. And it's kind of hard to do that because I think that's a really important role as an educator. But yeah, it's hard to do that if you're feeling like you might not be morally correct. Like it was just discussing how it's not any better to be avoiding topics that involve talking about morals or ethics or opinions about the world, politics and stuff. So yeah, it is kind of challenging. I think the role of an educator does involve that, but yeah, definitely you need to do your research and make sure you're not persuading kids to force them to believe what you believe. Yeah.
Exactly. And it's different from the school context as well. For example, in Christian schools, there's like pastoral care and things like that. So it can be different.
Yeah.
So where the teachers' involvement is different, right? So yeah, it's going to be a challenging area to discuss. So moving on to our next question. How do we know whether our position is correct or not? So how can we actually determine whether we are doing thing or not?
I guess with certain things you can't.
Sorry,
Like with certain aspects and opinions, you will always have different like stances on certain things compared to other people. And I guess knowing, I guess that's the whole thing with opinions and morals and ethics. Well, certain ethics you kind of have to follow, but it's very objective. So you really can't. If you talk to 3 people and you ask them the same thing, they might all have 3 different answers. So you really can't always know if you're in the right position or not. But with some things, I guess you could, because there's guidelines and rules and ethics around it.
Yeah. Yeah, sometimes that communication is important, right? So maybe, for example, we as teachers, when we face an incident, definitely we have to seek assistance from our supervising teacher or maybe experienced person. So maybe they have experienced that before, so we may have an idea from there to tackle. Yeah.
I also think there's like certain issues that like specifically that you're right on. For example, if it involves like discrimination, then you know that that's not right. Like it's not that hard to tell. Like if someone's discriminating based on like race or sexuality or something, that's obviously wrong. Or if there's violence involved, that's obviously wrong no matter what led up to it. Like both parties might be in wrong, but either way you have to step in and like show that that's not okay.
All right. What do you guys think about the Code of Ethics framework produced by TBR? Do you agree with it, or do you think it's helpful for us as pre-service teachers? Well,
I mean, it's pretty brave.
Right?
No, you go.
So I strongly believe it's helpful when I was having a look at it, because most of the areas that they have discussed, so for example, respect, responsibility and integrity. So I think it's good if we have that in handy with us when we are actually making decisions.
Yeah, I think it's good that there is this thing that exists. I mean, I guess it doesn't have to be long, but I thought it was a little bit brief and vague, maybe. I mean, I guess that's what the document needs to be, because you never know what kind of situations you might run into as a teacher. But yeah, it would be good to, I don't know, be able to talk about this more. Yeah, 'cause I'm sure it's an issue that comes up a lot for teachers, ethics.
I would say that I agree with it because I feel like a lot of what's in this framework is common sense, really. There isn't much there to disagree with. You know, we have to work with respect, we have our responsibility, and working with integrity. I think we all kind of like understand that as teachers and would already put it forward.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Okay, Bob, last two questions. Have you experienced the feeling of losing your freedom in front of students?
I don't really understand what that question really means.
I thought
Maybe the second.
you know, when we are new in front of like a new really new classroom, when we are doing our first placements, of course, we have to how we behave, right? So maybe that freedom maybe they're talking about. So no, it's quite vague.
Yeah, that's a really vague question. And like, really, as a teacher, do you ever have you never really have full freedom with students? You're still within what you're trying to teach. So like, you can't just do whatever you want.
Yeah.
So it's kind of a weird question.
Yeah.
I think the way that like I've probably been faced with that, well, not me personally, but I suppose heard about it, is that, you know, as a science teacher, I know that some schools, particularly like Catholic or Christian schools, when you're teaching biology, some schools actually require you to teach like creationism alongside of them. So I suppose that could be kind of like a restriction to your freedom if you don't believe in that, or if you're being like, not forced, but, you know, if you need to teach that side of things, when you don't want to neglect what you actually the natural biological side of it.
Yeah.
And probably like any like restrictions to what we have to teach according to the curriculum. Although I do feel like the Australian curriculum is pretty open anyways.
Yeah.
I think
that's true.
Also things like considering student views and their like knowledge which they bring to the class, like building on like biology subjects. In biology we talk about immunizations and vaccines, and sometimes you'll find students that don't believe in it or will disagree with it. And as a teacher of, especially of science, you would know that vaccinations are actually good and helpful for people, but at the same time you don't want that student feeling singled out or attacked or, you know, discriminated against because of their views. So I think it's a very like, in that circumstance, like you might feel like you're losing your freedom of like speech, or like just the way you have to go around it, you might have to be more sensitive towards it.
Yeah, I think I think that really goes back to what we talked about earlier as well. Just like you can't always be teaching morals, because like even if you believe that student's wrong, if that's what their parents are teaching them, you can't go and tell them they're wrong and then they go home and tell their parents that you're singling them out, telling them they're wrong, because that's literally not what your job is as a teacher.
Yeah, and I think if we go back to what before about how do we know that our position is correct, I think the other thing that we can do best is to be well informed, you know, use our position as educators to be masters of our subjects and like know what we're talking about, to help us to, you know, feel comfortable that what we're teaching is the most correct.
That's true. So different aspects of freedom. Yeah, exactly. So guys, we are moving to our last. Do you consider that the constraints on a teacher behave are reasonable and achievable?
Yeah. Just be reasonable. Don't like get overly friendly with your students. I think that's more than achievable. Like just, I think sometimes it can be a bit difficult when maybe I've seen with senior teachers, they're very like friendly with their students. And I think it depends on people's views of like if it's right or wrong. Whereas I see a lot of students do benefit from like strong teacher-student relationships and being able to joke with their teachers and like, you know, talk about their life with their teachers, right? I've seen a lot of students, like female students, who come up to their senior year teachers and just sit down and just talk about what's going on in their life. And some teachers may think that's wrong, whereas others may think that's actually helping them support their students. So I think there's, but obviously there are things which are like set in stone where you shouldn't do it. It's obviously wrong, which, you know, but.
Yeah.
Yeah, I definitely think other constraints are achievable, but I wouldn't say easy at times. I know that on placement I had one incident where, you know, at the end of a lesson, one of my students come up to actually my mental teacher, and all three of us were talking, and the student, because of things that happened in her personal life, she started crying. And actually my mental teacher started walking out of the room when she was crying because she didn't want to be, you know, in the room alone with that student. And I think in situations like that, it can be really hard. And you want to like really support the student, but also you don't want to put yourself in that position as well.
Yeah.
That's hard.
That's true. Yeah.
I was thinking from a different perspective. Oh,
yeah, go on.
Sorry, I was just thinking from a different perspective. Like, what about dealing with anger in the classroom? Like, as a teacher, you're constrained to, you know, keep your cool, and obviously there's going to be times where some students really just want to push our buttons. And yeah, like Alicia said, I think it definitely is reasonable and achievable to be expected that a teacher can be calm during those situations. But again, it's not easy.
I think there should definitely be support systems based around teaching and like the role of teachers to help them be able to achieve these like behaviors which are expected of them. Like teachers shouldn't be expected to deal with difficult students who are constantly creating like a toxic environment in the classroom without having any additional help from supervisors or, you know, other people in the school, and constantly having to deal with the student. Like they shouldn't have to do that. Like there should be an option for them to send the student to another, like, you know, maybe area or another, like in the library or something where they can cool off. Because I feel like it, although it may be achievable and reasonable, it's not easy. Like constantly coming to that class and knowing that that's like, because that's where your head's going to be if that's something you're dealing with again and again. So I think there should definitely be support systems to help that, like that aspect of the behavior which is expected.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's true. So guys, seems like we get into the end of it. So at summary, we talked about lots of things, and seems like morals and ethics are really important. Like as pre-service teachers or maybe as future teachers, we can think a lot about it. And all the points that we discussed are important. Anyway, we are going to meet you next week as well from another